Hi, Paul. Hi. I thought we'd talk today about reluctance to look at technique and why it might be that musicians are very reluctant to change their technique.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I actually think there are two ways of thinking about this. Is one is a musician who has what we might call an open system, so
Yeah.
willing to change and relearn and so on. And those musicians has what we might call a closed system, and then you only work within certain parameters, whether or not it's going to help them moving forward.
Yeah. We've talked before about sort of about whether people might, because the guitar is mostly a self-taught instrument, people might feel that their technique doesn't fit some sort of classical description, and why they might be self-conscious about coming along for a session on technique.
Yeah, I think that can definitely be a problem because it's always difficult to relearn or maybe to discover that what you're doing could be done in a different way, particularly if you've been playing for a long, long time. Because I get that there is the fear then that, but what if I can't do this anymore?
Mm.
And that's understandable.
I know because of your psychology background and your coaching, and I know that we both agree that we're very keen to have a blame-free culture when we look at trying to find the causes of things and trying to help people get to solutions for problems like that. Um, uh, and and I often spend a lot of time in clinic basically saying this is about finding a technique workaround now that you've got a clinical problem, and it's not about blaming your technique necessarily. We have a blame-free culture, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing for me is I always say to the guitarist, don't change what is working for you.
Mm.
Keep that. But there may be some other things technically that you need to look at that will actually improve and make your life a lot easier.
So, what's your view about how sensitive most teachers are in conservatoires, etc., to somebody that maybe say developing pain when they're practicing?
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is probably a very sensitive question. And I think it depends on who you speak to. But I think that certainly that sometimes I come across this problem that a guitarist will say, this is what I've been taught to do, and I've been told that this is how I must do it. And if it then doesn't work for them, well, then that obviously can't be the right answer. So I think learning about physiology, learning about how the body functions should be key for all young musicians who are studying music,
Yeah,
because they need to know how the body is functioning. And if the teacher doesn't know that,
yeah,
then how can the teacher actually help them if they are developing issues?
yeah. So, yeah, I think that's essentially the vast majority of people that we don't see that have no physical problems are very excellent teaching, and what we see here is the tip of an iceberg of people who come, they're unhappy, they've had a bad experience, and they've had what sounds like an insensitive teacher, and that we're only hearing it from one point of view, obviously. But yeah, that does happen, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and I think you're absolutely right. There can be certainly at least two sides to a story.
Oh,
But that
yes.
is important. That is important, that we are thinking about just the basics, mechanics of, for example, how does the hand work, as you so brilliantly explained in many of the videos that we are doing. But that this is incorporated into a young person's musical education.
Yeah, and I often think when I revert to using somebody like you or Penelope Roskell for piano or Alison Lauren for other string instruments, the orchestra, I often think, how can this work in parallel with somebody's usual teacher without causing any offense? Because basically, all of the people that work within BAPAM have a specialist interest in working with people who have pain when they play, and how can you find solutions for that? And that's not part of normal teaching, is it?
No, not necessarily. And I think that's where one of the problem actually are that should be incorporated into when you are learning to play an instrument,
Yes, it's more of a
particularly like the
forensic.
guitar.
Yes, it's about it's often repair. It's forensic repair, isn't it? It's trying to get to the source of the problem, and then using the skills that I have with all my diagnostics, and then the hand therapist, and then co-working with people like you when it's beyond the knowledge that I and the hand therapists have in terms of whether there may be a subtle technique issue which could be helped.
Yeah, and I think well, prevention is obviously better than cure, but there needs to be a certain awareness and openness about these things in musical institution. And I'm not saying that there isn't, because you and I both know that there's a lot of stuff going on in different parts of the world in music colleges, as we witnesses in the conference in
Yeah.
Norway. But I think there's still work that can be done, and we can always get better and do more.
Yeah, the healthy conservatoires network is a recognition of the fact that that's needed now. We need a much more heightened awareness and mindfulness. And the other thing we've talked about is that when somebody has had an injury and they've come back from it, how very often that they're much more mindful of preventing themselves from having an injury in the future.
Yeah, I think that's the real wonderful thing also with the work that I do, because those people who are coming to me, they are really open-minded guitarists, and it's to see the change that happens afterwards and
Yeah,
how they are willing to progress and try new things and develop things that work personally within their technical realm, and that's just brilliant to see.
yeah, excellent. Does that cover most of the things we wanted to talk about today, Paul?
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Excellent.
Mark.
Smashing. Good to speak to you.
Bye for now.